Hey, thanks for coming back. Today we're going to talk about something a little bit different, something maybe a little bit out of the mainstream as far as collectible firearms go. Not traditionally collectible firearms, but I think personally that it's an opportunity to collect guns without necessarily having to expend just all the money on the planet to do it. And what we have here are a couple of firearms that were marketed by Sears and Roebuck, the department store chain or the catalog chain. And for a while there, up until they stopped selling guns in 1988, they were one of the largest firearms retailers nationwide. And we see a ton of these guns come through, both through the repair shop and as used guns that we purchase for resale at the range. And not a lot of people know that Sears didn't make guns. A lot of people believe that Sears actually was in the firearms manufacturing business, and they weren't. Well, I say that, but in the early 1900s up until about 1915, they did own a company called Meriden Firearms, and that company built shotguns that were marketed by Sears. But other than that, they engaged in a lot of private labeling from other manufacturers, primarily Winchester and Marlin and Savage and High Standard, which are the two guns that we have here on the table today, were both actually made by the High Standard manufacturing company and then marketed by Sears under private labeling. Other big hardware store competitors to Sears, if you will, did that also. Montgomery Ward's famously had the Revelation brand, mainly Mossberg and Marlin product and some Savage product. But Western Auto did it. Gosh, JCPenney's even sold guns back in the day. So it was pretty common practice throughout. But let's talk about these two guns here. This little revolver, a little 22 caliber revolver here, was marketed by Sears under the J.C. Higgins brand name. And J.C. Higgins was a brand that was used by Sears on any number of outdoor products and sporting gun products, not just firearms, bicycles, tents, camping equipment. A lot of that stuff carried the J.C. Higgins name. And they were made by different manufacturers, much like Kidmore appliances sold by Sears, not actually manufactured by Sears, but they're private labeled. So J.C. Higgins, this little revolver here, the J.C. Higgins Model 88, was actually produced by High Standard. This would have been produced in the 1950s, and is basically the High Standard 99 revolver with the J.C. Higgins brand name. So J.C. Higgins actually was a real person. John Higgins, he didn't have a middle name, but the marketing people at Sears figured J.C. would sell better than just John Higgins. But John Higgins was actually a longtime Sears employee. Started with Sears in 1898 until he retired in 1930. And he retired as the chief bookkeeper. At one time he was the vice president of the company, one of the vice presidents of the company. And we don't really know if he was a gun guy or not, but he had his name on tons of outdoor products and a lot of different models of firearms. And he died in 1950. And after that time, Sears also used Ted Williams, a baseball player. His name started showing up on products mainly made for Sears by Winchester. Their version of the Model 94 rifle and the Model 1400 shotgun had Ted Williams branding on it. And then there were some that were just marketed Sears, like this rifle right here, which would be a later gun just simply with the Sears marketing on it. But this little gun here is the High Standard 99 under the J.C. Higgins 88 brand. And during the time in the 1950s, television was just, there was a huge resurgence of the Western genre in TV shows and in movies. So you had Rawhide, you had Gunsmoke, you had Have Gun Will Travel, you had all these different Western shows on the radio and on television that were really capturing the imagination of particularly younger shooters and adults alike. So companies were beginning to take advantage of that. Obviously Bill Ruger did when he brought out the single six and the Black Hawk revolvers, and High Standard was not to be left out of that. Their gun is a little bit different. It's a double action, single action revolver, which means that you can fire the gun by pulling the trigger all the way to the rear, or in traditional Western style by cocking the hammer manually. So to open the gun to clear it, on a traditional single action revolver, this is the ejector rod. On this gun, you pinch it forward, which releases the cylinder to swing out on the swing out arm. It's a 9-shot cylinder. Notice there is no spring on the ejector rod, so it has to be manually brought back into position there in order to close the cylinder. So by double action, we mean that to fire the revolver, you can either just pull the trigger straight through, it'll bring the hammer back to cock it and then release it, or you could cock it back and then pull the trigger just like a single action revolver. Notice that the firing pin on this particular style of revolver is fixed to the hammer, and that is one of the wear points, or one of the breakage points on this gun, is this can wear to the point where you have misfires on the rounds in the chamber or in the cylinder. So that's something to watch for when you're evaluating these guns, whether it's a Sears or a High Standard branded. So you see also the J.C. Higgins Ranger marking here on the barrel. That helps us date the gun to a degree. And then we have the Sears product brand, the 583 prefix, if you will, to that product number is indicative that the gun was made by High Standard. So on the guns that were made by High Standard for Sears, we'll have a 583 point in the front of the Sears model number. Other manufacturers would have different ones, and these charts are available on the internet. With a little searching, you can find what these charts mean, or who the manufacturer was on the guns. So we are serialized here. This rifle is not. Prior to the passage of the Gun Control Act of 1968, domestically produced shotguns and 22 rimfire rifles were not required to be serialized from the manufacturers. Many manufacturers did, but many did not as well, and there's no rhyme or reason to that. For instance, in the Winchester series of boys rifles, the majority of those before GCA 68 were not serialized, yet some were. All the Winchester pump 22s were serialized. So there really aren't any date tables as far as, I never can get that right. There really aren't very many date tables as to when these guns were made. The serial number records just don't exist anymore. They can be dated somewhat by the features and by the product date code. You can look on the internet and find out some of the original manuals and some of the original parts lists that will give you a general idea of when some of this stuff was made. Some High Standard product have a date code stamp on them, and some do not. And again, those charts are also available on the internet, where you can look those up and find out. This particular rifle is just marked as Sears Roebuck and Company Model 25. There's no J.C. Higgins, there's no Ted Williams, there's none of that. It's just Sears. But we do have that 583.2501, so we know it's a High Standard product. And in fact, High Standard did market this gun as the Sport King in 22 long rifle, semi-automatic rifle. Interesting little side note here, you see that this loading port here in the magazine tube is at about the 2 o'clock position. That's where it's designed to be. I can't tell you how many times one of these rifles has been brought in with the owner thinking that this was rotated out of alignment or something, but that's where it's supposed to be. It helps you load it without having to turn the rifle completely upside down, was the thought process there. But these are interesting. I mean, they're very robust little 22s. Parts still exist on the used market. Bunches of them were made, both under the various Sears brand names for this gun, and several different variations by High Standard themselves. Those parts do exist. And the High Standard parts will fit the Sears guns almost without exception. in the shotgun world, and I don't have one here to show you, but the Ted Williams brand and the Sears branded semi-automatic shotgun based on the Winchester 1400, the buttstock's different. But other than that, the internal parts are the same, and certainly the internal parts are the same here with the high standard. So what do we look for when we're evaluating these guns? Well, there's really not a ton of collector value associated with these guns as far as, or like you would attribute to, say, well, you know, Winchester product or Colt product or something of that nature. They're not heavily collected. So they're evaluated based on their shootability. So we're going to look at bore condition. We're going to look at the mechanical function of the gun. You know, is anything broken? Does it eject? Does the firing pin need to be replaced? Any of those issues? You know, is the stock cracked here, chipped out here at the toe on the butt plate? All those things that you would look at on just really any used firearm. There's really not a ton of collector interest in this gun. Now that said, there were some high standard models marketed by Sears only under the Sears name. Now, there is some talk on the interwebs about how much Sears stock, how much high standard stock was owned by Sears. And some say Sears had a controlling interest in high standard at some point. Don't know that that's the case, but they did have considerable ownership or considerable investment in the high standard, to the point where some high standard models were only offered under the Sears name. And those 22 automatics, and when we get some of those in, that they're almost worth a video by themselves. They had a retractable sling swivel in here, and there's 5 different models of those, 5 or 6 different models of those that were only marketed under the J.C. Higgins name or the Sears name. And also, Sears had the warranty repair stuff on this, so they did have repair centers out here for these guns as well. So the parts do exist. I think personally that for a beginning collector or somebody that doesn't want to spend just tons of money on individual pieces for a collection, you could actually make a pretty decent, fairly meaningful little collection of Sears branded, J.C. Higgins branded guns that actually are nice, you know, really nice little guns. The high standard, any of the high standard stuff, it's not junk, it's not garbage. They're really usable utilitarian pieces. But bear in mind that Sears also contracted with other manufacturers. For example, there was a Sacco produced rifle that was marketed under the Sears name. Sears also had a bolt action rifle that high standard built for them using FN Mauser action, similar to the Belgian Browning, if you will. So typically these Sears guns maybe had lesser finish on the wood, but the mechanics were the same. There wasn't any, and that's a common misconception on some of these box store guns, is that somehow they're seconds. They may only be seconds in a different type of finish, or maybe the stocks are birch or ash instead of walnut, but there's no way a manufacturer, even back then or today, is going to produce a gun with substandard internal parts and then produce it for sale, because that'll track back to them. So while they may be seconds cosmetically compared to the brand name, if you will, counterpart, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them from a functional standpoint. And you could actually come up with a pretty comprehensive collection of J.C. Higgins branded 22 rifles for the cost of a single first generation Colt single action Army or something like that. Now, is that going to be an investment type collection? Probably not. Is it going to be a collection that you can actually shoot and share with your kids or grandkids? 100%. So there's a lot to be said for that. There's a lot of value in that, in my opinion anyway, for what that's worth. And we're going to bring more of this stuff to you, as well as more traditional things. But don't shy away from these Sears branded guns, these J.C. Higgins or Ted Williams or just Sears, or any of the other ones. The Mossberg 500 is produced for Western Auto or Montgomery Ward. Same Mossberg 500 you buy anywhere else. So anyway, these are a couple of examples of Sears guns. These particular two are made by High Standard. And don't hesitate to buy them when you see them. If you need a good 22 rifle, there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. Again, thanks for watching. If you like the content, please hit that subscribe button. Drop us a comment in the section there about anything that you might want us to talk about, and we'll try to accommodate that for you. So until next time, appreciate you watching, and see you next time.